Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 2 of the What Moves Her podcast. And exciting times today. I am thrilled to welcome my guest, Colleen Barry. And Colleen, you and I spent time recently at the Sotheby's International Realty GNE, which was fabulous in Nashville. And we were on a panel together, and I just loved what you had to say about leadership and your rise through the ranks, so to speak, mentoring. And I just felt compelled to have you on to share with a wider audience. It was a pretty wide audience that day, too.
It was.
Yes, it was. So, Colleen, welcome to the podcast, and let's get started. So tell everyone who you are, your background, what your role is, and then we'll take a deeper dive into what's happened in the past. And I also want to talk about the future of our industry too, but over to you now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sherry, for having me on the podcast. And it was such a pleasure to spend time with you at the Global Networking event. You know, if we're going to talk about leadership, I need to start by thanking you for everything that you continue to do for leaders in our industry, particularly women leaders, because I think, you know, when I think back to some of the other members of the panel, these are people who have inspired me along with you as I've been on my journey in leadership. So I wanted to first thank you for that. But, back to telling you a little bit about myself. I am the CEO of Gibson Sotheby's International Realty. We are a 30-office company in Eastern Massachusetts. And we've been with the brand since about 2006. It was November of 2006. So we're coming up on a big anniversary again. And we have grown in that time significantly. And we've grown from 3 offices to 30. So it's been quite a meteoric rise when it comes to the scaling of the company. And much of that is due, of course, to the owners of our company, Larry Rideout and Paul McGann. But also the amazing leadership team that they assembled. And so, you know, when I think of my leadership role, a big piece of that is collaborating with all the folks on my team. And we just make an effort to lift each other up. You know, I think of leadership as being, when it's done well, you're empowering other people to be the best versions of themselves.
Absolutely. And you said it best, because it really is teamwork, and it's choosing the right people around you to just rise everything for the better of everyone. And what an impressive company. But I want to go way back, because I loved what you told me, and that is where you started your career.
Sure. So it's interesting. I did a number of things before entering into real estate, and I sort of happened into real estate, which, as you and I both know, is not an unusual story. So many of the people that we know who love this business, love this industry, love what it stands for, love the missions within it, didn't necessarily aim for it when they were starting their careers. And I did a number of things. I was trained as a graphic designer in college. And the truth is, as I told you before, I was not a good graphic designer. I'm okay, but I'm not great at it. And so I worked in printing, and then I worked for a documentary filmmaker doing distribution and research, a totally different tact. I think many of us kind of tack our ways back and forth, finding our ways onto the right path. And the right path happened as a result of the dot-com bust and, unfortunately, the ramifications of 9/11. There weren't many jobs to be had. In 2002, when I had finished that contract with the documentary filmmaker. So, like many people, I was cobbling together the jobs I could so that I could cover my mortgage. And those jobs at the time were doing freelance graphic design work. I was cooking in a restaurant most evenings. And then I was answering phones in the rental office of the real estate company that I now help run. And it was, this story actually ended up featured in John Acuff's book called Soundtracks.
Because I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I had read a number of his books, loved his books, because the messaging is really about mindset and how you can improve or change the trajectory of your life, because he's done that over and over again for himself. But the story he asked was, when did your mindset tremendously change your life? And I remember at that time, I was walking to work and I'm thinking, this is a pretty big setback for me career-wise. From, I was shopping a film at Cannes the year before, and all of a sudden here I am, and I'm going to answer phones, which is something I had done in high school and college. And so it felt like a setback, but gratitude became a big piece of it. And gratitude wasn't really a thing back then that people spoke about. I'm sure it was natural practice for many people who were successful. But I just realized I'm walking through this city, Boston, that I love. I always wanted to live here. And look at these buildings, look at the history. And in that role, answering phones, all I wanted to do was make things better for the people around me. So when I would be done with the compulsory parts of my job, I would try to find ways to make it easier on those around me. And I remember saying to someone, I know I can offer people ice cold spring water when they come in and they're tired and they're trying to figure this out, find a place for their kid to rent for college or what have you, but I wish I could offer them more. And the gentleman I work with said, I got a friend at Lavazza who said that they could get us a coffee machine in pods. We could make espresso. I said, I'll get the milk. So we instead, whenever someone would come in, I would say, can I get you a cold glass of water? Would you like an espresso or a cappuccino? And it was as if I had offered them a spa weekend. It was revelatory to me, because what I realized was I love helping people. And it's not about doing what is required. It's about going that extra step. It's about doing more than is required. And because I was doing more than is required regularly, suddenly I was noticed. And people would say, ask her if she'll do it. Ask her if maybe she wouldn't mind showing that to others and training other people. Ask her if she'll run the department. And that was sort of the beginning of that. And then comes in mentorship, and that really kind of takes it the rest of the way.
Wow. Well, there's so many things have struck me in what you just said. And so I want to take a step back and talk about surprising and delighting customers.
Yeah.
And before it was trendy to do so, which it is very much today, you were doing it. So that's number one. Number two, surprising and delighting and providing exceptional customer service without being asked. And number three, really taking on a leadership role, probably without even realizing that you were doing that at that time.
Yeah, then you were 100% right, Sherry. I mean, if somebody had said to me, do you want to be a leader? Do you want to be someone who is a successful business person? I would have said no. No interest whatsoever. But it was, I enjoyed taking care of people. And it wasn't until I started working very closely with Larry Rideout. And he truly became my mentor. And he's essentially a family member at this point. But, I watched Larry, and I watched the decisions that he and Paul made within the company. And I realized they weren't making selfish decisions or decisions that were strictly with the bottom line in mind. It was really about how can we help the people around us do better, be better, fulfill their dreams. That to me was something I was interested in. And that was only the first time in my life that I suddenly became interested in some kind of business leadership role. And now crafting it, again, after people like yourself, people like Nikki, people like Mai de la Vega, there are all these people, Christine Newell, I look around our industry at the leaders who are there, and I see what they do, and I'm inspired by it, and I realize I can craft my own version. And I can cast off the things I'm not interested in, and I can incorporate the things they have, and then I can find my own spin. So that's really what that is all about for me.
Well, when you talk about mentoring, and I want to make just a comment, but then I want to dive deeper into mentoring. I saw Larry Rideout, and we've known each other for a number of years at the GNE and having lunch in one of the restaurants, and he couldn't praise you enough. And in fact, at the session, which was primarily for women, but men, of course, were welcome and came. And we had several hundred people in the room. There's Larry sitting right in the center of the audience, which I just thought, oh, it was so heartwarming. But when we think about mentoring, I like what you said, because there's there are thoughts around mentoring, and then there's what mentoring really is. And, the way you use mentoring is by noticing what others do and, incorporating that into your best practices. So it really is never about walking up to somebody and saying, will you be my mentor?
Right.
It's you taking the initiative. And that's kind of a misconception about mentoring. Don't you agree?
I agree 100%. I think mentorship, when it's done well, is about finding someone who can help you acquire new skills.
Exactly.
But it's on you to acquire those skills. And some of those are going to be hard skills, as I might think of them, and others are soft skills. So a lot of times when I'm learning from Larry, some of it has been strictly like, how do you read a P&L, and how do you look at profitability, and how do you evaluate whether an acquisition is the right one to make? But a lot of it is, how do you handle conflict? How do you handle challenging situations where you, in a negotiation, seem so far apart? He is one of the most creative thinkers I've ever met. And I think there's an artistry and craft to leadership that probably most people, unless they've really watched it intimately, they maybe wouldn't even know it exists. And I'll go a step further. In terms of mentorship and helping women become leaders, I also think it requires the support of organizations and the men in our lives. And I couldn't think of a better example than what was going on in that room. First of all, you being there and investing your time, not only in that room and what was happening there, but in what moves her. I think of Sue Yannicone and her championing this important cause. Tammy Fammy was sitting in the right row. She's right in the front row, taking notes, taking pictures, just beaming with delight. Philip White came,
Yeah.
Brad Nelson was there. We had a tremendous number of leaders in that room who were all invested in trying to help others become leaders. And I think that's the sign of a good leader, is that someone who's willing to be a mentor, someone who's willing to be open, authentic, and to some extent vulnerable. Because when we do leadership in our organization, or at least my style of leadership and mentorship, is to be open about my errors and my mistakes. So a lot of times if I make a mistake, and of course, if I recognize it, because I may not always recognize it, I will call the folks that I work with, many of whom are younger than me, but not all of them. And I will say, I just screwed up. And I'm going to share it with you so that you don't have to go through the same thing. And here's how I remedied it. Or I might do it a different way. Again, leadership is not about age or experience. It's about skill acquisition. So I may work with someone who's 20 years younger than me, but he or she has a skill that I don't have. So I'll say, I struggle with dealing with this particular person, but I noticed that you do very well with them. Can you share with me how you interact? So when they challenge you on this, what do you do as a response? And so there is that ongoing mentorship happening within our organization, and it's not strictly a top-down thing. It never should be. It is permeating every layer, and it's going back and forth on a regular basis.
I couldn't agree more. And skill acquisition, I love that phrase. And one that I always use around mentoring is, at the accountability piece, where we really all want to be held accountable and need to. And so to me, mentoring is noticing without judgment. That's holding people accountable or holding a person accountable. Agree?
Agree 100%. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to a business consultant the other day. I was asked to participate in a project that he's working on for someone who's got a business, someone I know well. And one of the things I said to him was, I can't imagine being a consultant that one of your biggest challenges is that you may come up with a solution, but your client has to execute it. And if they have hired that person, in all likelihood, they want something to change about their business or how they operate it. And change, if you want a change in the result, you have to have a change in your process, but not everybody's open to changing their process. So I agree with you 100%. There needs to be witnessing and acknowledgement without judgment that's coming from the person who is working with you in the mentorship, but it's also coming from yourself. So, if I want to make a change and I ask Michelle, how did you handle that scenario? You handle those better than I do. I need to also be okay with the fact that her response, her difference, doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with mine. It's just that she's got a different approach. And if I'm willing to be vulnerable and open to that new idea, to accept that mine may not work 100% of the time, then I've got the capability of moving forward and growing and being better than I was yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are many great ideas and visions out there, but a vision without execution is really worthless, in my opinion. And,
Agreed.
Let's talk about risk taking. And you could not have grown with the team, the company that you oversee today, without taking what I like to call calculated risks, understanding the potential downside and acknowledging that you're willing to accept that. But there's also a tremendous upside as well. And so is there an example that you can share about taking a calculated risk throughout your lengthy career?
I can, and actually it's a very recent one. I find that a great opportunity to take risk is when you are in the midst of what might appear to be crisis or change maybe that you don't have control over, because something is going to happen. I think of a simple example could be during COVID, there were opportunities to make decisions, or you had to make decisions about how you were going to operate as a company. And each one of those decisions came with its own risk. So it became a challenge each time. It seemed like we were weighing risk in our options every hour, it seemed, for a while, which was exhausting. But the most recent example that I think is easier to understand is that all of us in our industry were facing change in the wake of the class action lawsuit settlements. Yeah. And ultimately, there were a number of things that were going to be changed on our behalf, but how we were going to operate within that changed world was really up to us. And what we decided to do as a team is to anticipate the direction that things were going in based on consumer sentiment, the DOJ, consumer action groups, class action attorneys, everything else. And not just go to where they were telling us we needed to go, but to actually think about what direction most benefits the consumer and the agent. And I think of the analogy or the story that we've probably all heard at this point about Wayne Gretzky. When they asked him why he was so successful, he said, "I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going."
Yep.
So what we decided to do was to decouple commissions and to say that we're going to charge our seller our side. We're going to coach them that the best offers are likely to come from buyers with great agents who need to be paid for their services, and let's let them finance those commissions or that compensation through the home purchase, right? So let's make sure that we are ready to account for that we're going to allow those offers to come in. But we're not going to advertise an offer of buyer agent compensation, because ultimately that is where we believe the puck is going. That consumers have said, I as a buyer want to decide what I'm paying my buyer agent. And that sellers are saying, I as a seller only want to decide what I'm paying my agent. So we decided to do it that way. And what's very interesting is, of course, there's risk. You worry, is this going to be commission compression? Are agents going to be able to make this leap with us? Are they going to be able to explain it to their clients? Are the other agents going to be able to understand it? There's a lot of risk that potentially could be associated. But here's what's happened. Sellers love it. And when we explain it to buyers, they love it too. Our agents, not only are they out there making this shift and being very successful in their businesses, but they're also helping their other agents, their colleagues within the industry. And as a friend of mine calls them, she calls them industry companions as opposed to competitors. But I think the reality is they're helping them embrace this new concept. And many of them are now saying, geez, maybe I should do it that way. And commission compression, if that's ultimately the question, are sellers going to pay that buyer agent compensation? And is the cheapest buyer agent compensation the one that's going to be chosen? That's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing instead is that the offers that are chosen, particularly multiple offer scenarios, which is where you would think that would be the biggest challenge, the best offers are coming from the best buyer agents who have actually prepared their clients. Those folks are coming in with fabulous, well thought out, well crafted offers, and those are the ones that are being accepted. They tend to have the higher buyer agent compensation. So it's very interesting. I think there are times where you think, what do we do? The world is changing. We're nervous. Do we try to batten down the hatches and just stay where we are? Do we turtle and try to avoid conversation? We think the opposite. We think what you have to do is embrace change, because change is coming, as you and I have both seen, in a much faster pace than it ever has. And I don't anticipate that that's going to slow down.
I agree with you. And finally, it's coming at a much faster pace, because you and I have been in this industry for a long time, and it quite often is very slow. But I love what you just shared with me, because once we post this live, you're going to be sharing it with everyone. Right. And it's fantastic that you and the other leaders in your company decided to take a leadership role rather than a wait and see. That's and right. This is not the time to wait and see. No. And so, Colleen, as we wrap up, I want to ask you, is there one piece of advice? It could be personal, it could be business, but you're such an incredible leader. Share one piece of advice for everyone who's going to be listening and watching this.
I think, if it's okay, I'm going to wrap it into 3 key points. I think that success comes from, first of all, understanding it's all skill acquisition, which means that from the moment we are born, we even have to be taught how to make our beds, dress ourselves, and tie our shoes. So in other words, any skill that you're interested in acquiring, you can. So that's first. The second piece is to do more than is required, because ultimately that is how things change for you and your trajectory. That's how you get recognized as a leader and as someone who does more. But third, take care of yourself first. You think about the oxygen mask on the airplane analogy. You have to put yours on before you can help somebody else. It is very easy as a leader and someone who cares deeply for those around you to burn yourself out. So you really have to be very cautious about taking care of yourself first, and then you can take care of everybody else.
Well, those are 3 incredible pieces of advice. Colleen Barry, you are a true leader, and it's my honor to have spoken to you today. I can't wait for this podcast to come out, and I can't wait to continue to network with you and learn from you and vice versa. Thank you so much.
You make me smile, Sherry. Thank you for everything that you've done and you continue to do.
Thank you.